Right, it's just gone 6:30, so we'll start the meeting. First of all, the usual fire evacuation proceedings. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Right, next to note that the open proceedings of this meeting are webcast. Next to ask that you switch your mobiles to silent, please. To receive apologies of absence, I've only received them from Councillor Robert Taylor. George? No. And Councillor Mark Ruffell is often a bit late, so we'll assume he'll come. Declarations of conflicts of interest? No. No urgent items. Next, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of January 2013. Do we confirm they're correct? Yes. Thank you. It's good thinking. Okay, yes. Sorry, there is one amendment. Our sex establishment policy. Is that right? Yes. No, that's the wrong one. That's a safety shield. No. That's what I said. Okay. Our sex establishment policy should be referred to full council, and that's a slight amendment on our paper, and it will be referred at the next council meeting for adoption. Okay, thank you. Right. Member and public participation upon issues contained within the agenda. I've got 6 names which I'll read out, and if you could confirm you will be speaking, and then if there's anybody else who I've missed, let me know. I've got Malcolm Hicks, Stephen Saunders, Stephen Murphy, Peter Dainty, Richard Ketteringham and Alex Dunlop. Is that everybody who wishes to speak? Yes? Okay. Roughly in that order? Mr. Murphy isn't speaking, okay. So I'll call you forward at the appropriate time. No referral from committees, council or cabinet, and no portfolio holder, so we'll get on with the main business of the agenda. Right, first of all, we are returning to the Hackney Carriage Fare increase request. We are returning to this, and there have been 3 representations, so we obviously have to consider those and decide what to do. So is it Andrew to introduce? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this report is to enable members to consider the objections received in relation to the fare increase, which was previously requested by the Hackney Carriage Federation and approved at the January licensing committee meeting. The original request is attached to Appendix 1. In summary, this increases the existing flag fare by 20 pence at normal times, 30 pence at 50% surcharge periods, and 40 pence at 100% surcharge periods. This means in normal tariff time, each fare would increase by 20 pence. 3 trade objections were received within the advertised consultation period. The objectors, who are all licensed Hackney Carriage drivers, supported the increase but disagree the increase should be loaded solely onto the initial flag fare. Following receipt of the objections, a meeting was convened with officers and the drivers making the objections. These drivers have requested a higher fare increase by up to 60 pence per journey during normal tariff time be considered by tonight's committee. Their objections are attached at Appendix 2, and Appendix 3 shows reasons the objectors feel a greater increase is proportionate, along with a proposal of how the increase could be added to the running journey as opposed to just the flag fare. The objector's proposal is to maintain the existing flag fare but incorporate a 20 pence raise during the first mile, and then to increase the running mile fare by 10 pence between miles 2 to 5, making a 60 pence increase at mile 5. I have provided a comparison table showing the fares and the percentage figures to illustrate both proposals. Officers feel the standard of Hackney carriage vehicles in the borough is exceptionally high, and the escalating overheads which proprietors are subjected to mean an increase is required. It is recommended that members consider the objections and approve an increase with or without modification to that initially proposed by the Federation. The committee would also need to set a date when the revised fares should come into force, and as this needs to be in effect by the 6th of April, officers have provisionally booked a meter update session on the 3rd of April. Officers also recommend that members agree for the licensing team to meet with the Federation to review future fare levels and increase proposals.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions for Andrew at this stage? Although we can obviously ask him later on if you want to. No? Okay. So can I have our first speaker forward, please? Which I assume is Malcolm Hicks. Yep. Thank you. It's the large black button.
Oh yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, that's great. Okay. Personally, my view that 20 pence wasn't enough. Bear in mind that when we got the fare increase in 2012, should have been for 2011. So we had nothing in 2012 in fair terms. And 2013 means that we're 15 months behind the fare increase that we should have got for 2012. That was the basis for my objection. If you only get the 20 pence, then that means we've only had 10 pence a year. You have a list of the costs we got. Just alone on the insurance on my vehicle went up £350 and continued to go up the year after the year after. The black cabs have gone up. They're out of reach. You won't see anybody probably renewing with a black cab anymore in Basingstoke. If it wasn't for me and Steve Murphy, you wouldn't have the Peugeots. We piloted getting them on the system so that we could have Peugeots in Basingstoke. We would only receive out of 20 pence £13 based on 100 jobs. This wouldn't cover wouldn't give us a pay rise. This wouldn't even cover the cost we've already got in our vehicles. It's just, I don't know how the committee arrives at saying that 20 pence is too much, because I believe in the last meeting you were split as to who wanted it and didn't want it. When you got the facts, now when we thought a fare increase wasn't right, we didn't ask for one for 3 years. Because we don't want to lose custom, but we can't go on running our vehicles with not enough money. And this is what's actually happened to proprietors. There's just not enough money coming in. We've just had 8 new licenses with the delimiting. That's 16 jobs an hour. There's been no homes or anything created to produce 16 jobs an hour for the new cars that's up at the station. That's all I've got to say on why I disagreed with the fare increase. If you have anything, want to ask me anything, I'm willing to give an opinion.
Can you just switch your microphone off for now, but stay there in case there are any questions? Does anybody have any questions at this? Yes, Councillor Goodison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested, the 40% increase that you mentioned in insurance charges, that does seem a quite dramatic increase. Is that being experienced by all of you? Is that an overall standard increase? And if so, why has it gone up so much? Or do you have any view as to excuse me, why it's gone up so much?
I don't know why it's gone up so much. We have to shop around, but the best deal we could get was 40%. It went up from 780 to 1100 and something. I don't know exactly, because that was 2 or 3 years ago. And then when we went back for another quote, it had gone up again. And I think it's because they got the corner of the market. The 10 million was always a problem initially when we first started with this. That started to increase the cost of the insurance. But I don't know why they've done it, and I don't believe they could justify it, but they still done it to us, and we have to pay it. We've got no choice.
So basically what you're saying is you're stuck in insurance terms with one provider. You can't sort of try and see if you can get a better deal elsewhere.
No, I'm sorry. There's loads around, but they were all more expensive than the one we got.
Oh, Councillor Regan.
Do you think I think I asked this before actually, the previous meeting, is it, all right, you're saying you need to increase to cover your costs. Do you think you would lose custom with the increase in fares, which in other words you'd be no better off?
Well, that's already happening, Councillor Raven. It's already happening because we didn't put it up when we thought we'd lose business, but we can't go on. You can't get 10 pence a year. It's just not enough money. It's not just the insurance that's gone up. The Peugeot garage won £100 an hour for labour. We just can't do it. If we don't get the custom, we still got to have the prices for the jobs. But I don't think that'll happen because anyone that wants to save money will go to a private hire, or they would take a bus, or they would get out and walk between houses and save the little bit of extra money that we're asking for. I don't think so. We have our customers that come to us because they say there's a consistency in the price. It doesn't change. And I believe I made a mistake with you once on a fare and I gave you the money back, didn't I? Yeah.
Can you switch yours off?
Yes? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Hicks? Is it Hicks? I'm going to just ask you one question myself. It would have been helpful if we could have had this discussion at the last meeting and not at this meeting, so that we would have had the two proposals to look at the same time. We've obviously lost a couple of months now. When we saw that we had some objections, it was a little bit of a surprise to see that it was from Hackney carriage drivers and not from the public. Is there any particular reason why it's you didn't give it up front at our last meeting when we were first discussing it?
Well, actually, I disagreed at the time when they said that they wanted the increase on the front. And I said that if they went forward with it, I would object because the revellers and people that are drunk only see red. And our job's quite dangerous. Your lives could change in a split second through just accusations. You don't have to do anything, buddy, to anyone. If they accuse you of something, we have to defend it. And that was the reason. I said I didn't agree that it did. And a poll was done afterwards, and in fact it turned out that everyone was against it going on the front, really, but it got lost along the way, and not all the drivers were seen. So that's why that happened. If that's good enough.
One slight concern I have is that if you don't put it on the front, if you don't put it on the flag, then it's like a hidden increase. Have you got any proposals for telling people when they get in your cab that it is going to cost more? Because obviously, if there's something on the flag, then at least they know that the prices have gone up. But if there's nothing, then they might be unaware of it and just be hit with it at the end of the journey.
Well, again, our experience is that people aren't not aware. They read it in the paper and they say, oh, you're having an increase in your fare. But we can have a chart inside the back window like we always used to. We can have something telling them that it's gone up. There's no objection to that at all. It's just that with private hire, they don't have a meter. And they kick off after 12 o'clock at £6.30 or something like that. So the reason for that is that we don't, it's more for the people that are drunk. It's wonderful if you could have it just for the daytime people because they're not under the influence of drink and they're nothing that's going to turn them. There's the odd person that gets upset, but generally speaking, the public are quite good. But that's basically the reason.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me, please, your insurance with the black cabs and red cabs, they are those normal Hackney cabs, aren't they? Now, do you think that the other type of cabs, do they pay the same level of insurance that you do, or is it?
No, private hire are cheaper, and I don't insure. I don't know why, but I don't insure my car for the full value because by putting it up, say, by I think it was £200. If I'd have asked for 25 or something, I kept it under 25, and I saved £200 on the insurance. So there's it's dodgy for some people there because you've got to try and keep it down. But if you go for 29,000, which mine was, they've increased the premiums on that because it's such a big payout. Well, your normal car on private hire well, some of them now are 20,000. So I suppose they're paying more, but I don't actually know what that is. But that's one of the reasons I think that ours was high. But I do keep mine down under a certain level because there's a premium for it going up above. So I requested that, yeah.
Can I quickly ask again, do they have the same facilities for carrying disabled people in the private cabs? Or are you the only people that can possibly do that? People in wheelchairs and so on? Are you the only ones who do that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Hicks? No? Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps I could ask Stephen Saunders, please. Thank you.
Good evening, committee members and Madam Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to respond to Councillor's question to Mr. Hicks just now with regards to motor insurance. Motor insurance as a whole has gone up across the board by approximately 40%. Women drivers insurance has also been levelled out with regards to a European Union decision that they would pay the same premiums as an ordinary driver. On the private hire side, they also pay the same sort of premiums that a hackney carriage driver pays. Okay, sir? With regards to the fare increase, my objection likewise was the fact that the increase was on the front end on the flag. I feel that certainly at night after 11 o'clock that's detrimental to the trade, because we do have a lot of people get into the cabs. They turn around and say, £4.50, you're having a laugh. You know, it's only going to cost me £5 if I get a private hire car. Many of the general public actually misrepresent a private hire car as being a taxi. The general public awareness with regards to private hire and hackney carriage is that we're not normal taxis. A normal taxi is a private hire car, right? The average cost with regards to private hire vehicles is between £12,000 and £15,000 a year. Sorry, £12,000 to £15,000 to buy a vehicle. We're currently looking at private hackney carriage vehicles that start at £22,000 to £23,000 and go to £40,000. Our servicing costs have risen across the board. The mileage that we do, on using a TX as an example, we average 5 miles per litre. That's not a lot. That's £1.42 a litre at the present time at the cheapest station in Basingstoke. My objection in, and had a meeting with Andy, we were actually 7 pence above the national average for fuel prices, diesel fuel in Basingstoke. That's based on the 11 garages that we have in this town. 7 pence a litre is a big increase. The national average at the time was 140.9. Fuel level or fuel costs have now dropped, and I understand that. You know, and one of the proposals that I put, or I suggested to Andy, is that we have a floating emergency fuel charge there. So 20 pence that can be taken out after a 6-month review if fuel prices have dropped. Fuel prices go up and down like a yo-yo. Right? I mean, they've dropped by, I think, about 5-6 pence a litre in the past 2 weeks. But we just had a budget. We were lucky we didn't get a 2 pence increase. The road tax wasn't increased this time. On a TX, the road tax is now over £400 a year. It's a lot of money. The average car is probably about £200 a year. The mileage that we do a lot of dead mileage coming back from drop-offs. There's not the businesses in Basingstoke any longer where we get flag downs or we get a call from Wellers or somewhere like that after we dropped off at Brighton Hill. We go back to the station or the bottom rank, 9 times out of 10 we're empty. You know, we're running for nothing really at the end of the day. So that's the reason why I suggested we have a larger increase as opposed to having the 20 pence and putting 20 pence on the front end. Oh, also, private hire vehicles have put their, number of private hire firms have put their prices up recently by about 50-60 pence a journey.
Any questions for Mr. Saunders? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Saunders. I think that's both people who want to speak about the new proposal. So we'll now go to those who brought the previous proposal. First of all, Mr. Dainty. He's here, please. Thank you.
Evening. We're back again. Right. Just listening to Malcolm and Steve, just a couple of points. With regard to the insurance, the real issue with insurance in our vehicles is personal injury claims, because you've got to remember we're carrying 5 passengers in the vehicle at some points, and if there are issues with that, can lead to a lot of personal injury claims, which then can rack up the premiums. And in fact, there are some areas in the country where they won't even insure hackney carriage vehicles, and some areas are quoting as much as £4,000, and that's pretty standard. If you go through the press, look on the internet, it's there. It's not what we're making up. Or, I was talking to Brian Rowland, the guy from the sort of private hire magazine, and he was telling me that in some areas they're really struggling. So it's not beyond the realms that we are looking at 40% increases on that side. Regard to the fare on the front, the point that you made, Madam Chair, about hiding it, well, we've been trying to work with it, or we have brought forward some ideas with the tariff card. Now that isn't hiding it, but it needs to be more obvious. And we were talking about this idea that they have in London, where you have it in the window and you have an idea of what the journey is, so that you can look at it and it's there. And this has been going on 18 months or more, certainly at the last couple of meetings that we raised. So that would get away from that. There is an element. In the old days, we used to put something in the window to say the fares were going up, like you do on a bus. But the tariff card is there. It is difficult for people to read. The calculations are difficult. So it does need simplifying. I think that's addressed in here at a point in the report, and it needs to be worked on for sure. With regard to road tax, a lot of modern vehicles, have zero road tax because they don't produce the CO2. The vehicles that we drive, and I know they're zero because my daughter just bought a new car and her road tax is zero. A lot of cars that we drive don't have that. We don't have that facility because we can't move beyond what we've got. And we come back to what we were discussing before. Councillor Regan says about increasing, will it drive away customers? We're to the point now where we can't have that luxury anymore. We need these increases because of the policy that is derived through this council. It is there, it is part of. If it's going to maintain itself, if it's going to carry on the way it is, it needs to be paid for. If it isn't going to be paid for, it needs to be re-looked at, because we can't go on like this, at the end of the day. Councillor Hood, when he was here last time, raised a point about 20 pence. I don't think it's his choice to make that decision. At the end of the day, it's customer choice. If you want to buy something, you may not be able to afford to buy it. But you can't go and tell somebody that, that they can't have it, or you can't tell us we can't have the income that creates for us to run our business. It's just pointless, because you'll put us out of business by virtue of the fact that we can't recoup the cost that you asked us to put in the first place. It's just that you need to sort the circle out. Now, if you have to redress or look at the policy again, it may need to be looked at. Nobody wants to increase things, and we all know that people are struggling. But it's come to the point now where somebody's got to front up, and it's got to be faced up. This is not working. We've got older vehicles on the fleet now. We've got vehicles that are more than 12, 13 years old. We've never had that situation in Basingstoke before, because people are now working out that there is a way to make extra money by selling an older vehicle into the fleet. Nothing wrong with it, nothing illegal with it, but it will continue on. And it is a result of what we've gone on in the past and what's happening in the past. It needs to be revisited so that we can move forward and meet these standards that you're talking about, because otherwise we're going to go backwards. That's about all I've got to say, sorry.
Question? Could you just stay there? Thank you. Councillor Regan.
Yeah, I think at the last meeting, I think it was you or one of your colleagues floated the idea of setting your own fares. That might be something that the committee might want to discuss later, and actually, obviously not for decision tonight, but a paper to be investigated. But do you think, would you put up more than 20 pence if it was now, or would you actually cut it, or to drive business? I'm just saying, what would the market determine as against your costs?
It's a free market, so we know to look at it. You're putting my fees up by 6% in April. There's 4.5 in here, but for me it's 6, because it's 3% on my badge and 3% on my vehicle. Okay, Did I hear a discussion about it? Did anybody ask me if I wanted it to go up? It's my money. Now, you seem to put it up quite easily on that side because you have cost to me. We have cost to me on our side. So what we're saying is we have to have the same freedom. We have to run a business. If you're running the same sort of business, you have to make sure that it is funding and it makes its money. And it's the same for us. We need to be able to recoup these costs. And bearing in mind that these policies are policies that are laid down by this council. Our fixed costs are laid down by this council, you know, completely across the board. We have no say in them. We have a choice of a Peugeot, we have a choice of a TX. Malcolm was right, the latest TX automatic has gone to £39,000. Now, £39,000 to buy it, add £9,000 to £10,000 on top for your repayments. So what are you looking at there? You're looking at somewhere maybe financing it over 6-7 years. And what's the vehicle going to be like after 6 or 7 years? So these are all questions that need to be looked at. And yeah, we probably would put our fares up. We would meet what it's the same way it is in the private hire side. When this first came, we were told that it's the same market, that it's going to be a free market. It's not a free market. It's not the same market because you control our costs. You control what we do. So you then say to us, provide us with a vehicle that will do this, but you can't charge for it, you've got to charge this. Now, it's not a political debate, as I said before, and I don't want to be rude about it. It's not a political debate. It's about the fact that these decisions should be made on what we want from Basingstoke and allow us to recoup the cost that we need to give that service. Because at the moment, it's a shambles out there. It's getting worse. You know, some of those vehicles are a mess. You know, I mean, but at the end of the day, they're allowed to be there. And I don't have a quibble with that at all because that's what the rules are. And the drivers try their best. But if we can't meet that income, they're steadily going to get worse. And we're going to have the worst fleet in the south. Not the best like we used to have. I used to come here proud of how good it was, you know? So I hope that answers your questions.
Don't go yet. While we're just on the subject of setting your own fares, have you thought through how that would happen? Would you, for instance, try as a federation to come to some consensus where you'd have the same problem as you've got here? Or would we have taxis lined up in a rank, each charging a different fare, and somebody has to go along and choose what they like the look of best? How do you envisage that would work?
First of all, I'm glad to see the other guys here tonight, and I'm glad to see that they've actually done what they said they're going to do over the course of the time, and it's good for the debate. Yeah, we would come here as a unified body. Yeah, I don't say that we want to deregulate the fares. There are councils that actually do deregulate. They don't regulate at all. That I don't think would be a good way forward. I'm talking about myself, and I think that perhaps some of the guys behind here have the same opinion. I wouldn't want to see us deregulate our fares because I think, as I said before, that we need to have the meter. We need, because of what we do, because it's a kind of captive market, if you like, because someone's coming out of the railway station, they want to go somewhere, they're not going to barter, so we need to have some sort of regulation there. What we would like to do is to be able to open up lines with perhaps the officers so that we come in a similar sort of situation, but it's based on what we have as our, well, as our running cost, basically. We come in, we have a chat with the officers, and we go from there, and then we are responsible for implementing the fares, maybe through the officers. It needs to be, we need to set up meetings and have chats with the officers to see which way we go, you know. But what we do know is, as Malcolm said, you know, 15 months we haven't had an increase. And I'm not sure that these decisions are being based on what we're presenting, because I can't see an argument against giving us an increase. I just really can't see it. But, you know, there's some, you know, I really can't.
Just to clear it up, we did approve an increase at our last meeting. In fact, as far as I remember, we generally give you what you ask for. So, you know, we're not arguing about that. I'll just ask Councillor Godison if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a tiny bit confused, Mr. Dent. At the beginning of your speech, you implied that the standards which the borough expects you to meet with regard to your vehicles was very, very high. And I was going to ask you the question of whether you thought perhaps they were a bit too high, or whether you wish to comment on that. But then towards the end, you were seeming to suggest that a lot of your vehicles are now in pretty poor condition. Are you saying that they no longer meet those standards, or you think they're getting close to not meeting those standards? Thanks.
I think that what I'm saying is that 10 years ago, well, 5 years ago perhaps, we used to have a fleet that was probably an average age of 3 years. We probably got probably, I would say now 25% roughly are over 5, 6 years old and continuing on. So by standards, yeah, they meet the standards, if you like, that they're wheelchair accessible, yeah, which is fine. And mechanically, perhaps, you know, that they are, but they're getting older and older, because we don't have the money to reinvest back into it, is what I'm saying, you know, at the end of the day. And that's what the fares do for us. You know, I mean, it's always going to be a problem, because we do realise, and you know, Councillor Egan, to a degree I sympathise with, because a fare or a journey only has a certain value on the meter. Now, you know, if standards are a very good thing, and you know, we want to meet them, fine, but we have to have that income. Now, it depends whether or not, if the people of Basingstoke walk away, they walk away, but we can't carry on the way we are. You know, we need to have, and we need to have more increases, and we need to have bigger increases. Over the next 3 or 4 years, we need to have some sizable increases to bring us up to running these vehicles.
Sorry, you didn't sort of really quite answer the question I was hoping you would. Do you feel that the standards which the borough is asking you to maintain with regard to the roadworthiness and condition of your vehicles, do you feel it is a bit too high, or do you feel the borough is justified in requiring those standards?
The borough's justified if we can have the income to meet them. You know, to set a standard is fine, is one thing. I mean, 1989 we brought in wheelchair accessible vehicles. Does anybody here know how many more wheelchair fares there are? Does anybody know how many more people come through the station? Does anybody know how many people come off the bus in wheelchair accessible vehicles? You know, I float the point tentatively, you know, are other people paying for something that may not be used? I don't know. You know, that's why I'm saying that there are areas that may need to be, you know, may need to be looked at. Yeah, I mean, if you want them, we'll supply them, but you can't have them on the cheap. I think, according to the phrase the other day, there are no more cheap taxi fares, because it cannot be. At one stage there were, you know, but it cannot be anymore because of petroleum, diesel, tax, you know, insurance. They're all there. You know, we're not making them up, Councillor. I know you don't think we are, but they are there, and they are really high now. You know. Thank you.
Councillor Rathel.
Mr. Dainty, we've agreed to the Federation's proposal previously. Do you want us to stick with that, or do you want us to adopt the objectors' proposal?
Well, for me, the more we can get, the better, because it would help us run our vehicles better. You know, yes, you did. You did approve it last time round, and yes, I would like to see us walk away from here with an increase. You know, and I would like to see if we can, if you're minded to give us the increase that's put for you tonight by the alternative, then that's fine. If you're minded to give us the other one, that's fine, but not so fine. That's the way I would like. But yeah, I mean, you know, obviously the better we can get it, the better it is for us, and it helps us the more, for sure.
Some clarity on that, please, because clearly the loading of it is what's being discussed is different between the two. You, as a federation, have tried to load it on the flag, as it were, and the objectors have tried to spread it across more evenly. And we'd quite like to know, as a committee, I'm sure, what the Federation's view about that is. Is that more beneficial, what the objectors are saying, in your view, or more beneficial to stick with what you've originally put before us and we've agreed to? Because obviously, depending on what your view is, depending on how we might think.
My view is that you know, spreading it across is a good way of doing it. Yes, yeah. I mean, and if you're minded to give us that, then I would be happy. Yes, and I think that we would all be happy with an increase that is larger and it's more spread out. The reason it was put on the front end is that at the time we were looking at increasing the fares by 20 pence on the job over the course of the time. You know, I mean, this one gives us a slightly better increase. And it's a manageable increase. I mean, it gives increases over distances. You know, I mean, you've got 2 miles, 3 miles, 4. They all go up slightly as they go along, and you achieve your 60p by 5. You know, by 5 miles. It's not 60 pence a job. It's 60p for a 5-mile job. So it has a good spread. Yeah, I don't have any argument with it at all. No. Yes, sorry.
From your perspective, you may have a lot more shorter journeys than a lot longer journeys. So you've got to work out actually where the peak of the income is for each of you and over the spread of drivers. But if you're saying actually it's a better deal, the objector's proposal, we've heard you loud and clear.
Linda, do you want to ask your question?
Hello, Peter. I just want to just ask loosely. You alluded to the standard, and obviously you were around at the time when the standard was introduced in 1989. What would you consider to be an alternative proposal, assuming that we kept wheelchair accessible vehicles, or would you consider that it's more appropriate not to have that standard? I'm just interested to know your way of thinking about what would be an alternative.
I'd have to think about that, to be honest, because I can see where we're going with the wheelchair. I mean, I once had a conversation with Clive Pennington, who was a licensing officer many years ago, and I said to him that I felt that the situation we were in having purpose built was going to lead to issues further down the line. Now I can see where we're going, or the idea of having that policy, and yeah, it is a good policy, and I don't think that anybody really has. I'm not saying don't have issues with it. Some people do, some people don't. But at the end of the day, if we're gonna carry on that way, then we need to meet the cost. That's all we're saying, basically. At the end of the day, here, Linda. You know, whether we could look at alternatives. I mean, that would be a discussion we'd have to have in the trade and see what the trade felt. You know, because I'm only one person within the trade. You know, so I mean, we'd have to have that discussion to see where we would go with that, and what sort of avenues that could possibly take us down, and that could lead to issues with ranks, and it could lead to issues with higher numbers, and there are other areas, because this policy isn't only about wheelchairs. This policy is also linked to keeping numbers to a controllable level, and Basingstoke would have an issue probably, I would think, because we don't have any HAL work, and it would then lead to issues of having to find more ranks, and so there are areas that we would have to address as a trade to look at, to come back to you, to sort of broaden that point out, really. You know, it's not something I could give an answer here this evening, you know.
Sorry, just quickly in response to that, you're probably aware that there's due to be a review of the taxi licensing law this year, so that may be an opportunity to consider the current policies in line with the review of the taxi licensing legislation.
And of course, the manufacturers might get on board and start to produce a vehicle that might be more cost effective, because at one time there was banding around a vehicle of being something, an all-purpose wheelchair accessible vehicle, something like 60,000–70,000 pounds. But there are talks of a Nissan coming in London. It's being trialled. So there are other areas. So it's about that as well. You know, going down the line there as well.
Councillor Barnes, do you want to say something? Okay.
Yes, please. Possibly this has been asked before, but is there any chance of having electric taxis that might be cheaper, or they cost more, or how does that all work out? Thank you.
As far as I know at the moment, the last I heard, and who knows with LTI, because they went bankrupt, and of course they're now Chinese, which is going to be a problem learning the manual. But you know, there is a situation. They were trialling a hybrid. Whether that's gotten any further, I don't know. Electric, the problem with electric is the technology is so expensive. Now, dare I say, you might encourage people by looking at their fees with electrics. You know, you might sort of start saying to people, okay, we will help you do something else with electrics. I don't know if that's the policy you want to pursue in terms, and also the other issue is charging them, isn't it? You know, I mean, there are a couple of areas, but I don't know in terms of how far they would travel, how far they would go, and I don't know of an electric wheelchair accessible vehicle. I don't know if anybody else does. I've not heard of a wheelchair accessible vehicle at the moment. So we would need a wheelchair accessible, and I don't know whether there is one. There is a private, sure there are private hire ones, and I know that the guys from Hart, they run a lot of eco-friendly vehicles out of there. So on the private hire side it could be achieved because there are saloons, but on our side the wheelchair accessibility is an issue.
Much. Any more questions, Mr. Dainty? Thank you. You've had a good grilling this evening. Does Richard Ketteringham wish to speak as well? Thank you. You are chair of the Federation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors, officers. Can I just start off with answering the question of the councillor over there? Since we had the vote with the fare to go on the flag or the fare to go on the mileage, we took another vote last week, and actually some of the drivers have come back and changed their mind. So we've had a consensus that the drivers now want the 20 pence to go on the mileage on the first mile rather than going on the flag. So of course this comes back to having the signs in the back of the taxi informing the customers of the fares going up and things like that. Yeah. Our focus tonight here is really twofold. Firstly, we need to return to the original request that was accepted and passed on a 20 pence increase on our fare tariff. We have sat and listened to an alternative proposal that is entirely down to yourselves to decide whether or not it's a better, more viable proposition than our own one. I cannot say or help with the new fare structure made tonight, as I was not part of its structure. Albeit, while there is no harm in an alternative fare increase, the Federation would hope that in future upcoming proposals, other individuals wishing to help evaluate and work closely with the Federation will be forthcoming and work towards all of the Hackney trade drivers' needs and requests. The Federation has worked closely with council officers year on, year out. We have had one or two hiccups over the past couple of years that have cost our drivers a great deal of money, and now we're playing catch up. Considering the continued rising costs we face annually and on a daily basis, 20 pence is actually not an awful lot at all in the real world, and because of this we tend to return to the committee this year for probably September for another increase. Secondly, we have a good working relationship with council officers. This relationship has been going on for several years. The Federation and many other drivers cannot understand the reasoning behind attending licensing meetings. Our fare structure, our future fare increments can without question be discussed quietly and constructively in an office with members of the licensing team. This would eliminate those annual meetings where we are sometimes questioned and grilled, like this evening, sometimes for no other obvious reason than politics. We are not a political body. We are ordinary working people whose livelihood should not be decided upon by a political body. It should be decided by a professional body, which would obviously be the licensing team. One thing I can't understand is when it comes down to other licensing factors, like when you license, be it kebab vans, clubs, things like that, there's no emphasis on them to be told you have to charge this much, you have to charge that much, and yet we're constantly being told, right, you know, you can have this, you can't have that. You know, we're responsible people. We don't want to price ourselves out of the market. We understand how difficult it is out there, and we realise if we put the price up too much, we'll lose custom. So everything we would want to do would be sensible. Obviously, if it was all decided, we would like it all to be decided via the council officers. Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Goderson.
I hope, but I'd just like to make the comment that I hope you do appreciate that, you know, I've been on this committee for a little while. I mean, it is a regulatory committee, and I'm not aware that this committee has ever acted in what I would call a political way whatsoever. So I think perhaps, I mean, I'm not criticising you for forming that view. I'm just saying that I would like to add that I don't think we run this as a political committee at all, but purely as a regulatory committee.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman, I'd like to say the same, and I wouldn't accuse the councillors opposite of playing politics with this. They may well play politics with lots of other things, but not this, and I don't think they're accusing us of doing it either. We've all got the same interests at heart. We all use taxis from time to time, and we're all worried about the cost of living. The fact of the matter is, none of us want to pay more for a taxi ride, but at the same time, we know that you don't absorb some of your costs in these fares, you'll go out of business. But if you have too many cabs running around, you won't be able to get the journeys to double up on the work. Now, I know that there are probably more out there than there should be. Who knows? But that's for your problem, but more than ours. So, but please don't accuse us of playing politics. I don't think we are.
Oh, there's another hot potato you just raised, so we won't go into cab numbers tonight. But just to say that we do obviously also recognise the importance of having the professional advice, and we do follow very closely the advice that we got when it's really important to us. But as you know, we also do represent people, and we are elected members. Any more questions for Mr. Ketteringham? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Mr. Dunlop here? Yes, thank you.
Good evening. Half my speech has been wiped out by what's been said already. So I haven't got a lot to say to you now, except to say why are we facing this grilling. We're facing innumerable questions, and all we're asking is for a few pence. This happens year on, year out, when we've got employers out there who've got a place in system that increases their employees' wages. There's numerous ways that a fair rise could be increased on an annual basis, and it can be worked out between the council officers and the federation and the trade as a whole. And that is actually what we're asking you to do, that you leave us to work closely with the council officers to produce our own fare structure, and we get on with doing that job as a professional body. And I'm not here to denigrate you as elected members. I'm sure in some areas of your daily lives you empathise and certainly understand situations within your constituencies. So the question is, are the council officers not qualified enough to work with the trade and be allowed to take themselves and the trade into a proper 21st century working environment? That's all I've got to say to you.
Could you switch your microphone off, please? Thank you. Councillor Regan, would you like to ask your question?
Alex. So you're saying you just want to, you don't want deregulation or leaving it to market forces, you just want to have a work out a fair structure.
Could you use your mic?
We want to work out a fair structure closely with the council officers, who would then obviously come and recommend it to yourselves without us having to come here. That is what I'm trying to say.
So you're really just suggesting a slightly different order of things? Okay. Okay, well, I mean, obviously that isn't what we're here to decide tonight. As far as the actual fare is concerned, which of these two schedules are you in favour of? Or would you like something completely different? Sorry, could you switch your microphone on? Thank you.
Sorry. They're both reasonable requests, and I would come down in favour with Mr. Dainty because he's given a very good, reasonable reason for accepting that proposal. The only thing that concerns me about accepting that proposal would be that you may then say, well, this is a newer proposal and we want to take this into the normal procedure of proposals, i.e. complaints procedure, everything like that, which would delay the system altogether.
Thank you. We have got to come to a decision tonight about, so something will be decided tonight. What it'll be, I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much. Do you want to ask a question? No. Thank you. That's enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Yes, Councillor Raphael.
Well, let's get the show on the road. I'm going to propose that the committee adopt what is called here objectors' proposal as opposed to the original Federation proposal. And I put that as a seconder. Well, can I just speak to that motion, and then of course you can debate it back and forth and do whatever you like. First of all, the principle of an increase has been established by this committee. It's a question of how it is imposed, whether it's front-loaded or spread. And we've heard from Mr. Dainty and Mr. Ketteringham, who've said, well, actually, upon reflection, they prefer it to be spread across. Well, bear in mind, we were guided by them last time to put it on the front end, and now they're saying to us, upon reflection, to spread it. I think we should be guided by them again. And so that's why I'm supporting what they're saying, and I hope the committee votes accordingly. Sort of with the objectors' proposal of spreading it.
Thank you very much. I obviously recognise the objectors' proposal also does result in higher fares. Yes. Okay. Yes. I was just making sure you've noticed that.
Worked out it would adversely affect me. Yes.
Anybody else wish to speak to this? Councillor Frankham.
The concept of the objectors' proposal, I like to spread across, but some of the the increase rates there are a little higher than I would want. Earlier in the report it says CPI was 3.4%, but that's February 2012, and most of them are above 3.4. There's a 3.7 for the RPI, and again, until you're up to about 8 miles, most of them are above that. So I think it's a little high, so I'll have to vote against it because of that, although I do like the concept to spread across. The other thing I wanted to raise, been interesting to hear where the trade want us to go forward on it, and I'd like a report to come back somewhere down the future on how we do the pricing structure, whether we delegate it to the officers, whether we leave it up to them, and how that would work, what the advantages, disadvantages, can we recall it back? And I think that's something we should be putting on the work programme to look at.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Burgess.
Thank you. I'm supporting what's called the objectors' proposal. We've already agreed to the increase in principal in this committee, and drivers can charge less than the meter shows quite legally. I mean, if you get to the end of the journey and it shows £18, you can say that's 16 squire to you. You know, it's up to you. You don't have to take the full amount. I should be driving a cab. I think I've got the jargon. I will be voting for the objectors' proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Regan, do you want to speak? Yes.
Yes, Councillor, I'm a bit split. I mean, I originally, I say it openly, I voted against any increase last time, but obviously, as Councillor Ruffle has said, that we have voted in principle to the committee to increase it. So it does seem fairer to spread it across, even though in terms it's an increase, isn't it? But so I've probably been voting in favour of the objectors' proposal. But just touching on what Councillor Franklin said, we do, and actually it's been flagged up quite a bit by the sort of the taxi industry. Is that, you know, we need to look at the way we raise fares, isn't it? I would against, as the last speaker said, is just going to the officers and let them raise that. We could have to be approved by some sort of committee, come back to us. Or the other extreme, you would go to leave it completely to the market, which some of my opponents here think would be quite unusual. But I think they might be shocked by what the market would determine at the moment. It would probably drive prices down, actually. But anyway, that's something for the future. But as I say, I'll be voting for the objectors' proposals.
Thank you very much. Shall we do this formally? How are you formally proposing? You have and we have a proposer and a seconder. And shall we add to that we also propose that the licensing authority and the Hackney Carriage Federation liaise as soon as possible to review the way in which fares are increased and look at ways to simplify the tariff chart. We'll add that in, okay? So on the table, therefore, is the objector's proposal, which is very similar to what was proposed last time, but with slightly more the higher the journeys go. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed. Thank you very much. Satisfactory outcome for you. Thank you. Excuse me, we do need to set a date for the increase, and we suggest the 3rd of April. Happy with that? Yes? 3rd of April, gentlemen. Thank you. Right, we now move on to the next one, which might still be of interest, but probably not, because it's really to do with private hire at this stage, but it might eventually, I think, come to the Hackney carriages as well. Amendments to the vehicle specifications to include 3 additional sections. Linda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Just before I start, the subject of the paper refers to Hackney Carriage Vehicle Specification, and Appendix 2 is the Hackney Carriage Vehicle Specification. That was meant to be removed. We are really only talking about the private hire vehicle specification tonight, so my apologies for that. This report seeks to approval for 3 amendments to the private hire specification for vehicles in relation to battery-powered vehicles, which have been quite topical tonight, to permit the use of run-flat, space-saver tyres or tyre repair kits, and to add clarity to the legroom requirements for front seat passengers. We all know that vehicle specification is evolving and technology is improving all the time, and that's been discussed tonight as well. Vehicles are becoming lighter, more fuel efficient, more environmentally friendly, with reducing CO2 emissions, and passenger comfort levels have also improved. Where design and manufacturer specifications have been made, these can conflict with our policy currently, and this policy the specification hasn't been reviewed in any great detail over the years. The specifications approved by this committee requires further amendments to ensure that it is fit for purpose, taking into account changes in technology and vehicle design. And the Department for Transport state that we should have a very broad range of vehicles. We have received recently a request for licensing a battery-powered or electric vehicle. The vehicle is charged by way of batteries and is plugged into a power point overnight usually. The specification doesn't actually prevent licensing of battery-powered vehicles, but it doesn't refer to them in any great detail, so we propose to include a section on battery-powered vehicles, and the amendments to that are included in the appendix. We acknowledge that battery-powered vehicles don't have an incredibly long journey time and require charging, but there's nothing to say they couldn't be used for short around the town type journeys, and we wouldn't like to prevent the use of that. There is also a restriction on the number of current charging points in the borough, but as I've included at Appendix 2, a recent press release by the government to say that they're creating grants to pay for battery charging points for local residents and for the local authorities to apply for grant funding for that, and residents can actually have them installed on their driveway subject to funding. This is really just to encourage greater use of battery-powered vehicles. And also, any vehicle that has a much lower CO2 emission would support the Basingstoke and Dean sustainability policy about protecting and enhancing the natural resources. And it supports the aims and principles within that policy. So I hope you'll look favourably on the changes that we've made to encourage more vehicles to take up the use of electric vehicles, more licensees to do that. Secondly, we'll be looking at spare wheel provision. Many of you that may have bought new cars recently, many new vehicles come without a spare tyre, come without a spare wheel, and it creates additional space. It makes the vehicle much lighter, reduces the emissions, and many more vehicles are now coming just with a tyre repair kit or a space saver tyre. So it is proposed that although private hire vehicles cover a greater number of miles than a normal privately owned vehicle, that the safety and specification manufacturer should be such that we should accept vehicles with a space saver or a tyre repair kit. We should, sorry, I've lost where I am. We would, thank you. We would suggest that we include a licence condition in relation to replacement of the tyre should a run flat have been used, or a puncture repair kit, that the vehicle isn't used again until that's replaced. Recently, New Forest Council did a study across Hampshire and revealed that 7 of the 12 authorities are actually allowing vehicles to be licensed in accordance with how they are provided for at manufacture. So we're suggesting that the Second Amendment is approved for the specification. In addition, legroom front seat passengers, we have measurements in there for rear seat passengers, and we've always taken the same measurement to apply to front seat passengers to ensure the same amount of comfort and legroom wherever the passenger would sit in the car, and that is currently no less than 30 inches. We've recently had a request to license an additional seat in the front row of a vehicle, and myself and Mr. Wake tested the vehicle, and we found that the middle seat to be completely uncomfortable, very close proximity to the driver, and very little legroom. So we did not allow that particular seat to be licensed because we felt it didn't afford a reasonable level of comfort. However, the licensee did challenge the specification, so that's why we brought that element of the specification back to clarify that the legroom requirements apply to rear seat passengers and to front seat passengers. And in fact, this Section 48 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act states that we should not grant a licence unless we can be satisfied that it affords the right levels of comfort. So for vehicles with seats that don't meet the comfort levels, we license the number of seats that do. So there are some vehicles that have, say, 7 seats, but we only license them for 6 or 5, depending on. So we think it's appropriate just to clarify that in the specification. So if there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them. Sorry for the waffling tonight.
Question.
Ask you some questions, please. Relation to 2 wheels, one wonders whether 2A is actually necessary, because it'd be quite strange to license a vehicle that didn't ordinarily have full-size vehicles. And if you went to license a vehicle that was running on a spare wheel, I think you wouldn't license it. Just wonder whether it's a bit obvious. And secondly, while you're dealing with that, can you deal with 2D as well, please? Because it seems to read, if I understood from the way you put it together, that if someone uses the spare tyre, one of these small ones, then they have to buy a brand new one. That seems to be bonkers. If you get a puncture, so what? You just put the spare on, go and get your puncture repaired, put the new replacement full-size tyre on, and put the spare back in the boot. Why do you have to have a new one? Is that what you're suggesting?
It's in relation to if a space saver tyre is used, they're just a smaller version of a wheel. So we would expect that to be replaced. Depending on the
tyres, small ones, it says 50 miles an hour.
That's it, yeah.
Why do I have to have a new one? Just because I've driven between the puncture place and the place I want to get to return the tyre.
I'm going to refer you to Andrew.
The space saver tyres are only designed to get to a replacement centre. The space saver tyre could then be used as a spare again,
Yes.
but the full-size tyre would need to then go back onto the vehicle.
Yeah, of course. That's what it says here. That says get a new space over time. That's what you just said. Once you've used it, you've got to replace it.
That wasn't the intention of that. So well picked up. It was yes, so that it would be the full-size road wheel would need to be replaced, but the space saver could then go back to being used as a spare.
You happy with that?
I think it probably does say that. It's just the way it was presented suggested something different, because we can understand that if you've had one of these inflatable tyres that suddenly puffs up, it may well be that stays puffed up, and therefore you may have to replace that one. But with a space saver tyre at 50 miles an hour, there's no need for it. But if it's meaning to say you don't have to replace it, well then I've got no objection with that section. Now I understand it. Can I deal with modification, section 11? Clearly, The section seems to read, no material alteration or change in the specification, design, condition or appearance of the book should be made without prior approval of the council at any time during the term of the licence. Surely that should be to only the whatever it is, 28 items that you specify. So for instance, if a driver wants to put an extra mirror in so he can actually see what on earth's going on in the back, does he really have to come back and come to you for permission? Or he wants to change the carpet because someone's puked up on it, does he really have to come back to you?
It depends on how you define material. I think it's talking about we wouldn't accept big spoilers put on or great big twin exhausts and all the rest of it. It's more about changing the original design. Adding a mirror we wouldn't consider to be a material change. Changing a carpet would still take it back to the state it was in, but it might just be a different carpet. We're more looking at spoilers and great big things that would impact on the appearance of the vehicle and safety, of course.
It's flexible enough to allow that. I'll let you decide that, but I've raised it.
Councillor Frankham.
It's on the point Councillor Fell raised. So I get puncture in my tyre that I put on a week ago. I then put the space saver to drive to the tyre store. I then have to put new tyre on there and not get a puncture repair on it. Because I haven't understood what he was explaining. Would I be allowed to get it repaired? So I wouldn't put a new tyre on if it's only a week old.
If I can expand on that, what we're meaning by paragraph D is that if you have to use a space saver tyre, you go to the garage at the soonest opportunity and get the puncture repaired on your main wheel and put the space saver tyre. So you're putting the car back into its original state with 4 good tyres, not 3 and a space saver. So that's what we're saying. Or if you've had to use a tyre repair kit, you may have to replace it. Well, you probably would. So you go to the garage, get it replaced, and then you replace the tyre repair kit. So you're back to your as new or as original situation. Does that clarify that better?
Any more questions about what's been written here? No? We haven't got anybody registered to speak, so if everybody's in agreement with the recommendation, we're happy to go forward with it. Yes? All agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And finally, review of our Statement of Principles under the Gambling Act 2005. This is our 3-yearly review to include amendments and improvements. I'm sure you've all read it. Linda.
Thank you. Yes, as it says in the report, we're required under the Gambling Act to review our Statement of Licensing Policy or Statement of Principles under the Gambling Act. And this has been reviewed every 3 years since the Gambling Act was implemented in 2007. We're slightly overdue on this one by a couple of months, but we've considered the risks to that and we consider them to be very low. I've attached at Appendix 1 the current policy that went out for consultation, and Appendix 2 shows the draft version of the new policy. You'll see there's lots of changes to it this year. We've taken into account lots more of the guidance, expanded on certain areas, and the right-hand columns will detail why those changes have been made or where bits of the previous policy have been moved to within the document. We did consult, and the list of consultees is at Appendix 3. See from paragraph 4 we had only one response, and that was from a member of the council employee who just referred to a document that we'd referred to needed to be changed. There were no other responses at all. Also, I would just refer you to the additional sheet that I've given you tonight. Councillor Raffel, I don't know if you have this. It's a replacement for page 9 and 10 of the draft policy, because the Race Relations Act and the Disability Discrimination Act have been surpassed by the Equality Act 2010. So those paragraphs in the document have been changed, and that page will be substituted before the document gets to full council. So unless there are any other questions.
Any questions? Questions? Can't believe it. Nobody has any questions at all. I have just one. It's just a matter of interest. You talk about interested parties. For reviews under gambling, do we operate on the old interested party definition?
yes, the vicinity test has not been dropped under the Gambling Act, so we still require people making representation to live in the vicinity or be directly affected by an application. Other comments, or are we all reasonably happy with that to go ahead? Yes?
Agreed.
Okay, all agreed. Thank you, and could I commend whoever wrote it? It's a good detailed document. It's got quite a bit of discretion written into it, which I like. So thank you very much. Just finally, we'll just look at the matters dealt with by subcommittee. You've got the full report of the one on the 22nd of February, at which the licence was granted with conditions. We may as well update you on the two that were held last week. On the 18th of March, the Leverstoke Park licence, which includes 2 major events annually. 3 conditions were added to make things slightly less troublesome for the nearest residents. And also on the 22nd of March, Bang Bar at Basingview, who were wanting a new designated premises supervisor, that one was refused. So at our next council meeting, we will see both the sex establishment policy and the gambling, whatever you call them, principles, statement of principles for our adoption. Okay, meeting closed. Thank you.